This week on the Nittany Dispatch, we discuss Penn State's roster changes, Andy Kotelnicki and Penn State's wide receivers, and the pommel horse guy, Steven Nedoroscik, the two-time bronze medal winner at this year's Olympics. This week on the Nittany Dispatch. Hello and welcome to the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber, Penn State football writer at the Center Daily Times. She is Audrey Snyder of The Athletic. And Audrey, we are in it. Like, we are fully in it now. Fall camp has started. We have seen two practices to this point. And by two practices, I mean 20 minutes total of practice.
Not 20 each time, John, roughly. Come on now. Don't shortchange it.
Yeah, it was closer to 17 or 18 each time if we're gonna be accurate here. But
I think what you're saying, John, we are so back. We are in the swing of it. We're a pommel horse podcast now, as you alluded to in the intro. We will get into that. That was the pivot that I did not see taking my week last week, but we are all kind of into the pommel horse sphere now.
Would you like to tell the world how you found out about Pommel Horse Guy and how you and I were on the phone and I was watching it to do a breaking news story?
True admission. Like, true. So it was a Monday, right? This is the team.
Yeah, it was a Monday.
Yeah. And I forget why I called you, but I called you about something. It was probably something dumb, like most of my phone calls to you are.
That's correct.
And I called you and you're like, hey, just a minute, like, this guy is going to win bronze and he went to Penn State. And I was like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. And you're like, yeah, this guy's he's going to win bronze. And I was like, or they're going to win bronze because of this guy. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to the store. I was off. So I think I went to the grocery store and then I looked like in the parking lot and I opened Twitter, mistake. And then I saw all the memes, right? And I saw Pommel Horse Guy blowing up and I was like, oh, okay. But I'm off today, right? So not my problem. And then by Tuesday, it was my problem because he had spread throughout the corners of the internet. And so I spent last week making a bunch of phone calls to people about Pommel Horse Guy, college teammates, his youth coaches who were in Paris, woke up at 4:30 in the morning because it was their time in Paris. My finest interview ever conducted, wrote a story about that, which we can get into a little bit later. But yeah, John, all of this to say, my week started last week with a guy I didn't know went to Penn State, and it ended, and I don't know, maybe they're going to put a statue of the guy up.
Yeah, it was a great story. You can find that at The Athletic. Of course, you can find all of Audrey's writings there, just as you can find mine at centerdaily.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Always helpful if you're watching on YouTube. Hit that thumbs up and the subscribe button down below. That is very helpful for us as we inch closer to, I believe, 1,000 followers on YouTube. We're getting closer and closer there.
Slowly but surely. And you know, John, we haven't even
appreciate all the listeners. I know it needs to be said, though. Appreciate all of the listeners and those who are sticking along with us thus far. I think we're 10, 11 months in, something like that.
Yeah, because we launched right around the whiteout last year, which was late September. Yeah, we were kind of slow out of the gates, but we're back, and it's been very nice. I've missed not having an audio space the last few years. Then last year, I've just genuinely enjoyed this, and it's been really cool. I've been out at bars, as one does, living in a college town, and it's been awesome to hear from people that are like, "Hey, we listened to the Nittany Dispatch. What do you think about this?" Or tell Johnny's wrong because of X, Y, or Z.
I firmly believe no one has ever said that to you.
Oh yeah, lots of people have. And or Audrey, we think you're an idiot because of X, Y, and Z. But no, that's why we do this, right? We want this to be a space for fans we're gonna tell you our unfiltered thoughts about the program, about our reporting. But we want this to be your space. And again, we have plans all this season. The post-game pods will be back. And so I look forward to it. But yeah, we're very much in the thick of preseason. Media Day was on Saturday. And John, before we even got to Beaver Stadium, where there's lots of renovations going on, very noticeable on the outside, there was some news before we even got to the stadium.
Yeah, so on Wednesday, we at the Center Daily Times is the we here, where the first report that Kaveion and Jameial Lyons had been put on interim suspension. Of course, you, being the intrepid reporter you are, confirmed it fairly quickly.
In the parking lot at practice, yeah.
Yes, as we sat outside right after practice. I think that is something that was this is a difficult situation that you have to be careful about your phrasing, I think, with a lot
Mhm.
of stuff here. So bear with me on that front. But I think this is something that wasn't overly surprising, given what we know and everything and where things are headed. And then on Saturday, prior to media day starting, so 3 days later, they were moved from the roster. Neither is at the university anymore. Um, the we can talk about the on-field impact. The off-field stuff is something that you just have to wait for these kind of
Mhm.
processes to play out, and just kind of go from there. And when that time comes, you and I will address it once things are, more suitable to address.
Right.
I guess is probably the way to phrase it, and when we can kind of speak on more. But yeah, this as a I don't think this was overly surprising once you know. And then you don't see them at practice. It was kind of inevitable that it was heading in this direction, I think. But it is
Here
going to impact the team this year.
Yeah, and here's the other part of this, right? Going back to Big Ten Media Days, you and I both noticed this because we talked separately about it afterward. When James Franklin, when players were asked about linebackers and defensive ends, there were two names that they kept not mentioning, right? James Franklin was asked several times about the defensive ends. Not once did he mention Jameial Lyons. Players were asked about, going through the roster. Hey, here are all the defensive ends. Lyons was not mentioned, right? Talking about the linebackers, Keys was not mentioned. Those are things as beat reporters like John and I are, when you're around the program, you pick up on just quirks and habits, right? And in your own mind, we're like doing the checks and balances as people talk. It's like, hey, oh, they didn't mention that guy. Why is that? Right. And going into that, we had heard some things and we're aware of some things. And so, you kind of start to piece this together. So, yeah, not a surprise based off of kind of the narrative behind the scenes that had been building. Uh, then you add Max Granville reclassifying, which James Franklin said on Saturday. And you and I talked on here about this before. We had not seen Penn State go this route with reclassifications, getting people here early. So you get a defensive end in here early. Franklin said they were not aware until late in the process that Max Granville even had an interest in doing this, as in skipping his senior year of high school and getting to campus right away. He's here. We saw him on the practice field last week. Again, just first blush, looks the part, but again, that's
Yeah,
like thinking that a true freshman defensive end is going to step in and impact the team this year that's a lot, right? Like, I think that's a
yeah,
stretch. Now you can also say, well, that's what Jameial Lyons did last year as a true freshman. Um, I don't think that's the role for Max Granville this year, but I still do think they have a lot of depth there. And James Franklin had mentioned that on Saturday too, about kind of some of the other names
yeah.
that maybe people have forgotten about. Because let's be honest, it's been a while since we've been talking about Smith Vilbert and Amin Vanover, and those are two guys that James Franklin highlighted.
Yeah, and Vanover especially was a guy that Devon J. Thomas at media days really highlighted when I asked him about who was standing out in the defensive end room, and he mentioned Vanover is one of those guys who he really believes in right now that he thinks is going to have a big year. He went on to list a bunch of guys too, but Vanover I think is the guy primed to take a step this year. And build upon what has been a good career so far, right? He's been a rotational defensive end that has been helpful in the passing game and the running game, but hasn't like had this massive season or anything. I think he's pretty clearly their third defensive end right now, but behind Carter and
Mhm.
Denai Dennis Sutton. The interesting thing I think is Smith Vilbert because he he
Do you
had this
remember the
massive
Outback Bowl, John?
well,
Do you
this is
remember the
yeah,
Outback Bowl?
this is what I'm getting at. Like he had this game where people were like, "Oh, a 3-sack game for Smith Vilbert against Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. Like that's a breakout game." And like nobody felt Smith Vilbert's presence at that game, right? Like it was not a situation where he was wrecking the game for Arkansas. It was like he kind of ran into 3 sacks, and not necessarily was creating problems for the Arkansas offense. And so I think that is a that kind of changed what maybe expectations were for him on the outside, and it was always a little bit fluky. Now it sounds like things are actually rounding into form, right? Where obviously like 3-sack games are not the expectation for anybody, but like
It
if
might be
he's
for
a
Abdul Carter.
Well, yeah, that hype train is really
Yeah.
building.
Mhm.
But if he contributes, as a backup defensive end to Deny and to Abdul, like that's a really big step for him and a really important step because he's dealt with injuries, he's dealt with the expectations that were maybe levied on a little too early. And now he has a chance to really grow and show that he can be a valuable contributor to this team that is going to need him because they do need that fourth defensive end. Um, Especially Zariah Fisher's out for, I think, I always
It
forget the
I
phrasing that they use with this.
well,
Zariah
this
Fisher's going to be out for a bit. Well, I'll say that.
out indefinitely is the phrasing, and I found that out because I
I
asked
thought it was a significant
Franklin.
period of time was what we were
Maybe
working
that's
with.
maybe
Yeah,
that, whatever it is. Yeah,
he's going to be out for a bit.
yeah, because I had asked at Big Ten Media Days about that, and I was like, honestly, I don't remember like how long is he going to be out, and then I think the response was like he won't be back soon or something like that, right?
Yeah, a
Um,
way that definitely didn't make it more convoluted or anything.
no, not at all. um, but I mean, to me, that's the right, and we know Abdul Carter's going to bounce back and forth between linebacker, defensive end, um, but again, on the on-field, strictly the on-field portion of this, losing Jameial Lyons hurts in a lot of areas. Again, he's a guy that based off what he did last year, I thought this was a big time player. I thought this was somebody that we were going to be talking about, in a year from now, saying this is an elite talent. But things change, right? Things change. The sport changes. The roster changes. And John, where I focused most of my time on media days was with the position group that we've been asking a lot of questions about for the last 2 years. No, I'm not talking about the specialists, the wide receivers, right? That's where I kind of focused my day.
The
Um,
never-ending conversation.
I will say I went. So we were over in Haluba Hall for the media day portion. We were in the stadium earlier for James and Kotelnicki and the coordinators. And so we go over and Marcus Hagans is sitting down and I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm good." And I was like, "So how many questions have you been asked about the receiving core yet?" He goes, "None, not yet." And I said, "Good. So let's start there." So I kind of started his day. I'm sure he had got a lot of questions after that. But I, my impressions there, John. I'll start here. The Julian Fleming impact in the leadership capacity is noticeable, right? Like to me, this is apparent. You talk to Julian Fleming, who is 23 years old, by the way, turns 24 in December, and it feels like you're talking to a grown adult, right? Which is good.
Yes.
It should feel like that. Which is again, you're talking to typically 18 to 22-year-olds. Now we're talking to almost a 24-year-old, and that leadership void, because I was talking to Harrison Wallace about it, and Trey Wallace said, yeah, he brings a leadership role that we were missing, right? Which again, we've speculated it, we've mentioned it. They didn't have it last year, it wasn't there. Now they have that, right? And it's just, to me, it's noticeable. And you look at Fleming, who made a point when he got here to kind of sit back, try to lead by example. He's won teammates over. So you say, okay, that's like you got that piece, right? The leadership part. Then the second piece to that is Trey Wallace is healthy. And I was tracking him down because I guess CBS was there. They were doing their stuff on Media Day, and I couldn't find Trey Wallace. And I was like, I need to talk to this guy. I've got a lot of questions for him. Where is Trey Wallace? I was almost ready to write a where is your maybe best receiver story. And
I'll say this now. I don't think we have to couch that with maybe.
okay. Yeah, no, I think that is probably I think that is a fair take. You tend to have a lot of hot takes, John, but I do think that is a fair take.
I
And go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say I will get back to this, but I do have something I want to talk to you about that we haven't discussed. Usually we talk
Uh-oh.
about a lot of this stuff off air, but there is something that was said on Saturday that I thought was notable that I actually
Okay.
haven't done any digging on because I forgot about it. I can bring it up now, or we can wait till we're done with the receivers discussion. But I
Oh, okay.
want
Couch it
to.
for after the receiver because I wanna
Okay.
let the suspense build in,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
my
yeah.
mind.
That's right. Keep the listeners and the viewers here for a
That's
while
right.
still.
But so to me, it's like you got the leadership component, but then you also take Harrison Wallace, who I said, something along the lines of, do you feel like it's going to take a game or two of like good performances for you to feel like you're here, that you arrived? He said, no. Like, I'm here, I'm ready, let's go. It's like, okay, this guy's confident. He's healthy and he's confident, right? One of the things we will hear from AJ Harris this week, I didn't get a chance to get to him on Saturday, but I am curious from the opposite side, right? What are the cornerbacks seeing from these receivers? Kind of what's that been like? Caden Saunders, we know he's the leading punt return option. We found that out on Saturday. We kind of assumed as much, but Justin
Yep.
Lustig gave some confirmation to that. I did talk to Caden for a bit. And he said, as a receiver, it's about feeling more comfortable. And he knows all the different positions now in that receiving core, and they're going to move him around. So I think the upside is there for him. But those are my two big impressions with the receiving core, is that they have that unquestioned leader in Fleming, and that Trey Wallace is confident and he's healthy and he's ready to go.
Yeah, and Kotelnicki mentioned that versatility too with guys, that they want guys to be able to play so they can get them in and out, and have guys that they can trust at various spots. I also think Saunders is, I think I said this last year too, though, so maybe I'm just gonna die on this hill, but I think he's ready for a breakout type year, right? Not their number one receiver or anything, but someone who's consistently contributing to the offense. Yeah, I think this is one of those strange discussions because it feels like Groundhog Day, one, because we talked about this all last year, all during the season and all off season. But it's like the focal point, and there is nothing that we can see in practice that you and I can say about them, that James can say, that Higgins can say, that, Fleming, Kotelnicki, Wallace can say, to prove anything until we see it against West Virginia, right? This is one of the
I'll even
more.
go a step further than that, John. Like, you got to see it a few weeks in a row, right? Because last year, West Virginia, you had the Allard to Keandre Lambert-Smith shot play,
But I
and then the
do think
offense
that
wasn't that.
I think that play and the Rose Bowl play to Keandre were both a little bit misleading, just because you
Yeah.
when you have a big play like that, it kind of skews statistically, right? Like what you're doing. And like it's an outlier. It obviously counts. Like, I'm not like, obviously during the game, the course of the game, it matters. But I'm
Yeah,
saying when
John,
you're
say this to their face. That play did
right,
not count.
when you're trying to evaluate what the offense is and what it's going to do, you don't want to just be like, oh, Keandre Lambert-Smith's the number one receiver because he had over 100 yards. It's like, well, if it was like 4 catches for 103 yards or whatever, it's like, that's different than someone who's catching 7 passes for 112 yards because they're consistently getting open and everything like that. So yeah, I think West Virginia, this is part of it too. Part of our job is like, we'll be evaluating it. You and I will both do, or both be rewatching the games at least. And I think that will be telling. But yeah, I think we're not going to know enough until we get to that point. And it is not great podcasting to say that. I'm well aware of that, but I do think that Wallace is ready. I think he's proven it in the past that he can get there and be the number one receiver. I do think Fleming can be a number 2, and I think Clifford and Saunders can be a real number 3. It's just a matter of the top 2 guys staying healthy, for one. Both have dealt with injury issues in the past.
That's a big if, yeah.
And Fleming told me when I sat down with him in June, late May, early June, something like that, that staying healthy is like one of those things that he's just trying to prove, right? He wants to prove that he can stay healthy, and so he can go off to the NFL and have a long, successful career. But yeah, I think until it reminds me of the offensive line conversation from a few years ago, right?
Oh,
Remember how
geez,
at the media
yeah.
days when James said, like, he's like,
I'm
I'm
not going to
done.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
like,
Yeah.
I'm done praising the offensive line. Like, it feels like we're inching closer to that point, right? Where it's like, there's
Yeah.
only so much you can say until they just go out on the field and prove it.
That is a really good parallel, John. I'm kind of surprised maybe he hasn't taken that approach with the receivers. Just like, we're not talking
Maybe
about it.
what if that's the approach next year if it happens again?
Oh, God. Can you? Oh, man. Ooh. God help us all. If
That's not
this is
good
a
for anybody.
conversation again next year, yeah, we will all be absolutely out of our minds. If
We'll
that
just be
is the
republishing these podcasts, these episodes as new ones, pretending
yeah,
that
well,
we're re-recording.
we'll just plug in different names and dates, but just let
Yeah,
the
we'll dub
themes
over it.
roll.
Yeah.
No, but you mentioned West Virginia, and I did ask Jaywan Sider while I was talking to him about a bunch of different things. But one of the things I said, hey, what have you told these guys about going to Morgantown week 1? And he goes, "You know what?" He goes, "I've told him it's gonna be loud." He said, "This is a crowd that is a lot like Penn State in that regard and that they're gonna be rowdy." And he goes, "Quite frankly, I'm glad we're not playing at night." Which is true. I mean, Penn State is dodging one there, by not playing in Morgantown at night.
Which they've been on the other end of that plenty of times.
Yes.
So I think
Oh, yeah.
they were due for one of those where they
Yeah.
lucked out with that. This
They
was the
they
case
were
a couple
due
years
for a
ago too
scheduling break.
with Wisconsin, that was not a night game either. That was a noon kick
Mhm.
when they went to Madison.
Yeah, and that to me, it's like I thought about this over the weekend, right? So it was a Saturday, we had media day. Sunday, I was working, trying to like sift through extra media day audio and map out my stories for the week. And I was like, oh, it's a Sunday. I'm working again, writing about what happened on Saturday. Like we're back in the groove.
Yeah,
And soon
this
enough,
is
we'll
where
be
I
in
try and figure
Morgantown.
out. Yeah, this is where I'm trying to figure out, like, do I have days off this week? Right? Like that's
Mhm.
half the battle. And no, I think you're right. Like we're there. The one thing before I forget, uh
What was your surprise moment? What's the
I might be misremembering this. I went back and listened a couple times, and I think I heard this correctly. Andy Kotelnicki was listing everyone that had
Coach
taken.
K? You said Coach K?
If you want to call him Coach K, have at it. That's fair game. But if maybe I misheard him, maybe it was an accident. But I thought when Andy Kotelnicki mentioned the players taking snaps, who do you remember him mentioning? If you remember this, because he was talking
In the
about Nick
podium?
Dawkins. Yeah, when we were at the podium
Oh,
session.
no, I don't remember any of
I
this.
believe he mentioned Nick Dawkins, Venga Ioane. I think he
Oh,
mentioned
no,
Sal
I do
Wormley was doing it.
yeah, I do remember that, yeah.
I don't believe he
I
mentioned Cooper Cousins,
I no, I think you're yeah, that sounds
which is
I know
bad
I
for a take that I had
vaguely
previously.
mhm, which we can revisit that because actually yeah, I need to go back and double check that because I do remember when he said that, in my head, I remember thinking, "Okay, Sal, Venga, okay, obviously Dawkins." But yeah, that's a good point, John. I guess that we have a Thursday question for James Franklin now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen to
Maybe
it,
he
and
just
if
misspoke, maybe we're misremembering,
right, like this is, and I
maybe
didn't follow up
John's
on it or
takes were
anything.
terrible.
Yeah, but this I and truth be told, some of the audio when you go back and listen to it isn't always great in those press conference settings because either someone talks nearby or there's an echo or
Well,
something
I'm a
like.
very loud typer, so
Yes,
anything I'm
well, I
trying
know
to
that's true.
record, it's yeah, anybody who's ever said around me, it's I'm
I
a
can
very
You
yeah,
can
I'm a loud
also
typer.
listen to me breathing usually on my audio, which is a lot of fun for me to have to
John's a
listen
mouth
back to that.
breather, I'm a loud typer.
That's
We are what we
that
are.
is at least a little bit true. But no, just curious, something to file away there that I'm gonna again go back and re-listen to several times and make sure I heard it correctly. But
You
if
know, I will say though, I saw Cooper Cousins in a piece of content that Go PSU was pushing out about the new training table. And
which
this like
one?
yeah, there were like 20 of them, right? I think everyone clearly got the message. Post about the new training
Shout
table.
out to the coordinated tweeting that was definitely occurring over like
Yeah,
three
it was
straight
not
days
very
there.
organic.
No, it wasn't.
It was very much a
But I
let's
assume
tell
the
everyone
food's
how great it is.
delicious.
I mean, the video looked good. It looks nice. Again, like you talk about off-field resources, things that this program has wanted. This is one of them. So training table is where like they go to eat their meals, right? So obviously they're spending a lot of time in there during camp, especially. Looks like they've got a nice TV set up in there, but Cooper Cousins was kind of leading the video as he was going around fixing his plates of food. But looks like a very nice facility. But yeah, they definitely will not be getting any points on the organic portion of the promotion of that because it especially initially like very much looked like assistant coaches tell us how great training table is. Tweet about it today. Teammates, players, like
Yeah,
I get it. You're trying to be
it was a
grateful.
lot. Well, no,
But
and
yeah,
it
we were
is
getting
like
spammed by it.
it is good to be grateful for those things
Yeah,
because people don't have
I'm not.
access to
Yeah,
those. But like,
and it's cool for us to see it, right? Because like, and
yes,
fans want to see like what is your dining hall, right? Like think
right.
of training table like that. What does it look like?
Just
All
personally
that
not how
stuff.
I would have handled it from a trying to make it organic standpoint. Uh, but no,
But hey, I mean, hey, John, I've spent all summer in a social media, digital marketing analytics grad school course. So now I
listen.
noticed these things.
Some of us already have a master's degree,
It's
so
true.
we don't have to
That's
worry
true.
about such things.
That's true.
Uh, but no, one of the other things, big things from media day for me was Andy Kotelnicki in general. As curious as always, as entertaining as always as a speaker, right? Like I thought
The guy has a presence for sure.
he really does. Like
Mhm.
the immediate asking about the water bottle and if he can drink it right off the bat, and then
Which
getting on Bob
okay.
Flounders for his Bucky's hat or his Bucky's visor. When mind you, Bob has never been to Bucky's. I know you said you just learned this Saturday.
Yeah.
I learned this back at media days in Indianapolis, and I was on him immediately. It was like, dude, what are you doing with the visor then? Like, what is you're trying to start a war in this Sheets Wawa territory by wearing a Bucky's hat when you've never been to the
Never
joint
even been
before
to the
twice.
place. Like, that's a choice. One, that is a choice for Bob.
Do love Bob
Two
though.
two, I to me, again, maybe I read in general too much into this in life, but body language, the way people talk, when people are genuinely excited about something, you can feel that when they talk, right?
Yes.
Like, and I'm one of those people, I talk like how I talk, right? Like I just am always pretty animated. Andy Kotelnicki has that, right? We walks in the
Yes.
room, it's the big personality. Hey, how you guys doing? Um, that is a very sharp contrast from what Mike Yursich was like, right? Even just around us.
You think?
We experienced it both in person and on Zoom. Um, to me, like, there's value in that, right? Like, I think, and again, this is not to speak ill of Mike Yursich, but it's just very noticeable when you have these different personalities, right? And I think if you're looking to get a group of 18 to 23 and a half year olds excited, I think you need this guy, right? I think there's value just in his presence. And then I think on top of that, obviously, the offense has to work. It has to be creative. It has to be fun. And to me, it's like he's checking so many boxes in my own, like, yeah, if I was 18 to 23, I'd want to play for this guy because he seems fun. He seems, it's just like when you have the teacher in school, right? You want to have the nice teacher that's funny, going to make you laugh, but like you're also going to learn and it's going to be challenging, but you're going to get stuff done. And I think that's what Andy is based off of what I'm seeing on the practice field, what we see in these media settings, what we're hearing from players. I think like that personality, it's just real. It's him. And it's refreshing to see from the outside.
Yeah, and I think that was on display when we were in Haluba talking to players and coaches and everything. He got a question. I can't remember who asked it, so my apologies on that front. But about essentially what kind of feedback the quarterbacks have given him, and he stopped for a second, looked to his right, saw Bo Prabula, and yelled over to Bo like, "Hey, what do you usually tell me about other than my good looks and my like all of this stuff?" Like,
Oh,
but it's
wow.
clearly like he's just very comfortable within his own skin. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like most importantly, Andy Kotelnicki knows who he is, right? Like, and he doesn't seem to sway from that. He doesn't. He's not going to go away from that path at any point. And I think that's important when you're obviously developing an identity of who you are and having players connect with you, but also on the field, right? Like he is supremely confident and believes in what he does and knows what he does works. And I think that is going to play a massive role this year because I think it didn't always feel like that was the case in previous years. That
I
whoever was calling the plays had that like the proper amount of confidence, right? Like the appropriate amount of
this
confidence.
does not feel arrogant. This is
Right.
feels like
I
a
was trying to avoid saying
genuine.
it. It doesn't feel like arrogance, right? Which I
Mhm.
think there are a lot of coordinators that where it's felt like they're just
Yeah.
arrogant and not willing to sway from their plan. This is confidence because of belief in process, belief in the path that he took to get here. How
Belief
they
in
form
doing
their
it over
offense.
time, right? How many times has James
And belief
Franklin
in
said that,
players
right?
too, yeah, it's all of it. I think to steal a James Franklin quote, it's all of it,
All of it.
right?
It's a
Like, yeah,
combination of things.
but I think that is going to be a massive difference for this team this year.
You mentioned the creativity, the various roles, talking with Bo Prabula across scrums. I talked with Bo Prabula on Saturday, and I asked him what it meant this summer to hear Coach K say that he's one of the best players on the offense and that they're going to get him involved. And to paraphrase, Bo said, it was really nice to hear that. Like it was always what he's wanted to hear, right? He's always about helping the team any way he can. And then Bo Pribula said something that caught my ear. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, whether it's playing quarterback, wide receiver, running back, whatever I can do to help the team. And he stopped. And me, being the intrepid reporter, I said, excuse me, you just opened the
We've
door.
got
Can you go
the
back to that?
intrepid count is now at 2 for the podcast for those keeping count.
We're in the weeds now. And so I was like, excuse me, are you opening the door? Like, is this how they maybe plan to use you? And then he laughed and he's like, I mean, I don't know like what Andy puts in the installs some days until we're out on the field. Like, I'm just not sure. And I was like, okay, maybe you said something you weren't supposed to. I don't know. Maybe so this could be our first wrinkle alert of the season, John. Bo Pribula package wrinkle alert. Again, Andy Kotelnicki talked about using 2 quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, that was I was gonna say that's I think the next step is Andy was asked about, is it crazy to think that like a 2 quarterback system on the field at the same time could be in like possible in the future? And he just like very sternly and with a straight face said, no. Like, why wouldn't it? You know what I mean? Like
But
he
no, it would be possible, or no, it run
no,
that back.
no, he doesn't think it's crazy, right?
Oh,
Like
okay, it doesn't okay,
because
so it is possible. Okay, gotcha.
yes, he views it as a normal thing. And my guess, and this is we'll call it an educated guess, is that we will see it, right? Like we did see it at Kansas.
Kansas, come on down, yeah.
Yeah, like I think this is going to be a feature of this offense, right? Is that they have 2 quarterbacks that they trust that can do very different things. Important that both can do the thing that the other excels at, right? It's important that Drew
Ooh,
can run. It's important that Bo can pass. But uh, I, I do think this is going to be a part of the offense.
you mentioned that, like, the thing that the other can't do. This things that caught my ear on Saturday, James Franklin had said, he said, "You guys are gonna see Drew do some things that
Yes.
you haven't seen him do before, but he's gonna do just enough of those things that you might say, wow, we didn't think Drew could or should do that.'" Hello, mobility, right? Like, that's
Yeah,
part
my
of it.
guess is that's like you're looking at like speed option stuff like that,
Mhm,
right? Like stuff where he's running on the perimeter, maybe
mhm.
quarterback power. They've run in the past, so that's probably not what he's talking about. But like things where he's like getting out on the edge and trying to utilize because Drew does have good long speed. It's just he's big and it takes longer to get there,
Yeah.
right? The advantage Bo has is really about the acceleration that he has, and the quickness in and out of cuts, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that at this point. And I do think that's a notable thing that James said, right? It's another indication that they plan on taking advantage of Drew's mobility to keep defenses on their toes. That this is going to be a different offense than the one that we saw last year. And I've seen this. I think some people are treating this as like it's like a reskinning of the offense, right? Like it's essentially putting uh, you know a new name on it, and it's the same thing. I don't think that's going to be the case. I do think this is Andy Kotelnicki's offense, right? Like, and I think the differences are more about the language of the offense, right? The how he calls things. He mentioned he actually said this. He said it at media day to a small scrum of us, and he said it last night too on the. Well, I don't know when they interviewed him, but when they did the Big Ten Network was at Penn State
Mhm.
practice
The camp tour.
thing. Yeah, he mentioned that if they call something trips and he calls it Trey, like they're not he's gonna relearn it because it makes more sense for one guy
Right.
to relearn it than the entire coaching staff roster and everyone else to relearn it. I think the verbiage is probably going to be what sticks, right? Like that'll be similar. That's not something you're going to see. It's not something anyone, a fan is going to see or anything. Uh, I do think this offense is going to look quite a bit different this year, and I think for good reason. I think it needs to.
Dare I say, John, from the small snippets we've seen in practice, the body language that I'm probably reading way too much into, the receiving core that, while very unproven, has some confidence.
Yeah,
Dare I say this Penn State offense might be fun?
I think that
Is that
is
taking it too
probably
far?
putting too much on him at this point.
Uh,
Here's my issue that I'm running into. Penn State
mhm.
offenses for the last few years have not been fun, right? They've not been enjoyable to watch. They've not been explosive in the ways that you want them to be. They've stalled at times. They're not
They've
creating
swung
with
the
these
gate
guys
too
that.
far.
Well, you said it, not me. Uh, Andy Kotelnicki's offenses for pretty much the last decade or so have been fun. They've been creative. They've
Mhm.
been new, right? Like I asked him about his time as a coordinator early in his career in the early 2000s, and he said he probably wasn't creative enough back then. That's clearly not the case now. He has evolved and developed into one of the best coordinators in the country, and I think this is what Penn State's going to run into, right? Like the immovable object of their offense being stagnant at times, not having necessarily the personnel that you want versus the unstoppable force of Andy Kotelnicki's creativity and his willingness to try new things. And I think Kotelnicki will end up, his talent will end up prevailing here, right, over any perceived flaws in
Mhm.
personnel. I think he is going to maximize what they have. You know, I think Wallace can be number one. I think Fleming can be number two, like I said. But at the end of the day, you probably have to bake in some missed games for both those guys at this point, or at least missed reps. Like it's part of it with them at this point because of how often both have been injured. I think even in those situations, I think Kotelnicki is good enough as a coordinator to create something else, right? To create with someone else,
Mhm.
and to make things happen even when his best players aren't out there. So I all
You
that
got
is to
2 running
say,
backs who are really good,
yeah,
right?
but I'm
You got
saying like
Quentin Martin, Cam
even at
Wallace as well, we've heard a lot about.
even at receiver, I think he is
Mhm.
going to put those guys in situations that takes advantage of their talent, like we saw with Amari Evans the last
Yep.
couple games when Jay Sider and Ty Howell were in charge of the offense. I think all of those guys, the down depth chart players, are going to be put in position to succeed. And like I said, all of that's to say that I think this offense is going to be really good this year. I think it's going to have a chance to be the best of the James Franklin era potentially outside of and this is an important caveat, outside of the McSorley Barkley run when both of those two were in the
Mhm.
backfield together. But I think this can be schematically, it might be the very best. It's just a matter of, can the talent rise to the occasion? It quite frankly hasn't the last couple of years. Now things are different. There's a new coordinator
Take a
in charge,
chance.
and they have a new opportunity.
And I think that is one of the things I wrote about this week on The Athletic, which it actually came up during Big Ten Media Days, and I hadn't heard this before when I was talking to Tyler Warren, and he said that one of the big changes for the offense this offseason, since Coach K got there, was that after the first spring practice, Andy went into them and was like, "Okay, like somebody, you're up. Like somebody on offense, you're standing up." And they're like, "What is this guy doing?" And they had clips ready to go that the coaching staff had selected of good practice, good examples from the previous practice. Those are known as the "we are" clips. And then there were examples of guys not finishing plays, not practicing up to the standard. Those are the "we are not" clips. And it was on the player who was standing up to take the offense through that, right? Which means, hey, so and so, like you did a great job with this. Oh, hey, so and so, I'm going to have to criticize you and find a way to do that in which I'm nice. I'm not going to hurt your feelings and offend you, but I have to kind of call you out. And this has been Andy's whole point from the spring up to this point at camp was we need to develop leadership with this offense, right? We have to identify guys that are going to be leaders. And then once we identify them, we need them to use their voice. And one of the ways that they're doing it is with this we are not thing after practices. And Allard did it on Friday again. Caden Saunders was telling me. Nick Singleton said he's already done it twice. And the thing with Singleton, who is very quiet, he said the
Yes.
first time he was really nervous because he's like, I have to speak in front of a group. And Tyler Warren said the same thing. Like, he's like, I would not say public speaking is my strong suit. Like, ooh, this made me nervous. But one, this is helping players develop in life, right? And Jaywan Sider said he loves watching the guys have to do this because while it's new and they're all uncomfortable, you're going to have to be able to do this, whether you're in the NFL, whether you're getting an actual job, you have to get comfortable in front of people. So that to me was really interesting. And I think a good peek behind the curtain of one of those other aspects of this that unless we ask about it, we're not going to kind of hear these details or know about these things. But this is a way, again, Penn State has not named team captains yet, but James Franklin said they're not worried about that. That unless there's someone who's like clearly, obviously captain material, they weren't going to do that at this point of camp, but that they feel
Yeah,
good in that category. Go ahead.
they've waited in the past
Mhm.
to do
Yeah.
this, right? If I remember correctly, the year that Jair Brown was named a captain, it was pretty late in the spring, or pretty late in the summer. I want to say it was like
Yeah, I mean, and then, like,
August.
there's different scenarios, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and he
when
was
you
a
have
good leader. Like everyone, like respected
yeah.
Jair Brown. It's not like I don't think this is a cause for concern. In fact, I think this team has better leadership than it did last year, and you could argue it's on par with
Mhm.
the group the year before when they had a lot of leadership. Uh, when Sean
Or the
Clifford was still
PJ
there.
Mustipher, yeah.
Yeah, like when that group was still at Penn State. So I think like we've seen it and heard it. Like Nick Dawkins is one of the best leaders you'll ever be around.
Mhm.
Andy Kotelnicki was effusive with praise for him about how special he was and how he's, kind of hammered that home with coaches on the staff. So I'm not really concerned about their leadership in a way that maybe going into last year you were a little bit, just because they were really young. Their best players were really young, and their oldest players weren't necessarily the most. They weren't their best leaders, to
Yeah.
quite frankly.
And
Like
I think
the old guys on the team weren't necessarily the ones that you wanted leading the charge.
and, like, Theo Johnson did a really nice job with last year's group and
Yes,
kinda stepping into that, but I think one of the
Theo being the
challenges
massive standout of the bunch, of course.
Oh, yeah. I think one of the challenges was that some of your best players on this offense, even now, their personalities are not the most talkative, robust, outgoing,
Right.
like and that's not a knock on them. That's just a unique setup where Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, if they had it their way, they would never have to talk, right? Like, they would love not having to talk,
Same
because
with
they're
Tyler Warren.
really introverted. Tyler Warren, Drew Aller is getting more comfortable with it, but at his core, like, this is not necessarily who he is. But hey, you're a quarterback.
I
You're
do
gonna
think
have
there's been a
to.
massive difference there with Drew, though. I think that
Eh,
is where the most
yes,
notable change has
and
happened with how
players have
vocal he
mentioned
is.
that. Yes. Mhm. And that is one of those shifts, and Drew said, going back to the we are not" thing that I wrote about, that he said, "This has been the best change for the offense. The best thing that they've done," right? So we're talking about creativity and speed and space and all these other things. You've got leadership now, you have direction. So I think that is just a really interesting thing that kind of came out of Saturday for me.
Yeah, and on defense, like I think the leadership is obvious, right? Denai Dennis Sutton is not afraid to say what's on his mind. KJ Winston's relatively quiet, but is I think
Mhm.
in that mold of a Jaquan Brisker type leader, the lead by example, but like really,
John,
forceful enough in that
we don't
example.
talk about Chicago Bears on this podcast.
That's on you.
Truly.
That is purely an Audrey Snyder issue. But no, I do think that this group is primed to be better in almost every regard. Like I said,
Mhm.
Theo Johnson was a great leader for last year's team. Some of the returning guys too. Devon J. Thomas was a really good leader with that team too. But I don't know that they've necessarily lost a lot of leadership and a lot of those.
Kobe
A
King.
lot of yeah, a lot of the most vocal guys are coming back,
Mhm.
and they've been able to take a step forward both on the depth chart in some regards and both in their in how vocal they are and how much they're willing to be critical of teammates.
And we know someone who doesn't shy for being vocal is Tom Allen, whose voice
Right.
sounded absolutely shredded when he met with us only like
Well,
2 practices into the preseason.
I have news for you on that. Get used to it. When I was at
Yeah.
Indiana, I don't know that when I was covering Indiana, I should say, I don't know that he ever had his voice when we spoke. He just this is a part of the job for him. Tom is a very vocal man, and lets players know when they're doing things well and when they're not. And I think that's going to be crucial when it comes to accountability and leadership too. But also it's crucial to what should be an elite defense once again. Like
Mhm.
I don't think we have to mince words or dance around it like we do with if you have any optimism about the offense. I think this defense is going to be one of the best in the country. I think Tom Allen, if he wanted to, could be a head coach again pretty quickly. I highly question if he wants to. But I do think he's in a spot to be, to have this group be at the top of not just the conference, but, when you look at the ESPN SP Plus rankings done by Bill Connolly, who does an excellent job with those,
Mhm.
it's a forward facing metric that it does a really good job of gauging where teams are at and where they're headed. And most importantly, like I think they're going to be top five on defense once again. And I think that is the norm at Penn State. And I think that'll be continue to be the norm as long as Tom Allen's the defensive coordinator.
Do you think, John, do you think Abdul Carter leads the nation in sacks at the end of this season?
No.
No? Do you think he's top 5?
I have a take that is half baked that I'm not.
Oh
I don't
boy.
know if I'm willing to throw
Okay,
out there.
and well, maybe we'll have to do our bold predictions another day here on the
Yeah,
news.
let's bottle that one up because I don't know if
Okay.
he leads the team. Uh,
So yeah, I mean, I Deny is really good. I
yeah.
think that's fine. Yeah.
And I also think that he's going to play linebacker enough that he'll be rushing
Mhm.
from linebacker, to be clear. Like, I don't think that Penn State has talked about using him in both spots. I don't think he's going to be
Yeah.
dropping into coverage. I mean, he will,
Yeah. Yeah, he'll
presumably,
have
but
to
I
at
still
some
think
point.
the primary focus will be rushing the passer still with Abdul Carter is my, again, call it educated guess. But yeah, I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to be one of the best players in the country. I think he might be like, I don't know. He has a chance to be the first pick in next year's draft. Uh,
Mhm.
I think that's on the table, but I think that Deny might have a better chance of leading the team in sacks this year.
Yeah, and then I mean, again, you never. Which, if that's the case, John, that's a very good problem for Penn State to have, right? That's the
Yeah, I hate this phrase, by the way. It's one of my like the everyone that keeps using this in my life, and I don't know why. The good problem to have thing.
It's because they
It's
said
not
it
a
about the
problem.
kickers. Yeah.
I know, but it's not a
Yep.
problem then. Like, don't call it a good problem. Like,
There
that's
are
not what
no good
problems
problems,
are.
right?
Right. Like it's yeah, it's I think
It's a combination
it's
of things.
right. Right. It's all of it. But yeah, like it's a good problem to have. It's like, no, it's not a problem. It's just a competition. It's fine. Like, you don't have to call it a problem. But no, I think this defense is going to be one of the best that we've seen under James Franklin, which is saying a lot given how good
Mhm.
their defenses have been. And whether the offense takes the next step or not, I think this team's probably going to win it. Like, it's got a floor of 8 wins because of the defense alone, right? Like, if the offense is just average, like it was for a good
I
chunk of last
you
year,
well,
I
you
think it
think
has
the
a
floor
floor of
is
8.
8?
Yes.
I would go a little bit higher, but
Well, I mean, there are like West Virginia's. So
yeah.
if you count the losable games, and we'll do predictions before the season begins and everything.
If you
If you
count
count
the
the
losable
losable games, but very
yeah.
realistically, could
Oh,
you see
yeah.
them losing West Virginia? I could.
Yes.
Could see them losing to USC. Could see them losing to Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Could see them losing to Ohio State.
Mhm.
4,
Yeah,
you know? And
that's
I
fair.
do like I don't think I think Washington may have been in that boat and then it became the whiteout. And then, I don't no longer think that's the case. I do think Washington will be better than people anticipate though. I think, Jed Fish is gonna have that offense rolling pretty quickly. But
I can tell you, from a logistics standpoint, that Washington will be prepared. I am working on a story that this week I'd mentioned it before at Big Ten Media Days. Washington will be taking 2 planes to get here because of the unique airport situation in State College. But with their 2 planes, they will be coming.
and way to tee it up for me to close this thing out, because if you want to find the rest of Audrey's writing in that story when it goes up, you can find that at The Athletic. You can find me at the Center Daily Times at centerdaily.com. You find Audrey on Twitter at OddSnyder4 and me at John Sauber. Don't forget to give us those 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button down below if you're watching on YouTube. We will be back again soon enough, weekly at this point, post game, of course. This is us now. This is the
If we
football
see
season
an
that we have.
open practice, we'll talk about it. I don't know if we will, but if we
That's
see
the
one,
thing.
we'll
If we see an open practice, that'll probably warrant an emergency pod, I would guess, not just the
Oh, yeah.
regular weekly one. But until then, we will be back next week around this same time, hopefully. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.